Hey everyone, Mr. Sujano here. In today's video, we're going to talk about something very exciting in the retro gaming industry, and that is the Commodore 64 Mini. Let's get started. Alright, for those of you who don't know, the Commodore 64 was originally released in 1982 as a computer. Now, this computer ran at a whopping 1 megahertz. Actually, I think it was just a little over 1 megahertz, but it wasn't very fast by today's standards. In comparison, the Nintendo Entertainment System ran at about 1.79 or 1.8 megahertz. And that is the American version of both the Commodore 64 and the Nintendo NES. Now, my Commodore 64 gaming memories are very limited as I never actually owned one. There was one set up in my school and there was games on it when I was a kid. I remember 3 games in particular for this system. California games where you could surf or ride a bike. Pit Stop 2, which was a pretty cool racing game. And this weird French game called Mimi. And that's the little Mimi character right there. I don't know if you can see my mouse just circling it, but it's an interesting game to say the least. Nevertheless, in my neck of the woods, this never really got the attention it deserved. The Commodore 64 was heavily overshadowed by systems like the Nintendo. Now, they are releasing a brand new Commodore 64 Mini in 2018. So this team has followed the same approach that the Nintendo Corporation did with their Mini NES and Mini SNES. So here is the Mini C64. Now if we scroll down here, you can see it's 1982 and a new home computer graces the scene. Out goes a silent black and white experience and in with the 64 kilobytes of RAM, color graphics, and synthesizer sound. Roll forward 35 years and kick nostalgia into overdrive with the release of the C64 Mini, a tiny but perfectly formed 50% scale replica of the much-loved machine. Featuring high-definition output via HDMI, a classic-style joystick, and 64 built-in games. Now that's really cool. So this, right off the bat, has 64 games built in, which is also interesting considering it's the Commodore 64. Pretty sure that was planned. So high definition output at 720p via HDMI. Now that is completely understandable. I wouldn't expect something like this to put out 1080p. Pixel perfect graphics at a 4:3 ratio with full width, CRT filter, and US, Europe display mode options. That's really cool. Save game function, 2 USB ports, plug in a USB keyboard, and use as a fully functional home computer with C64 Basic, or add a second joystick for 2-player games. So there's no word right now whether or not this will work with different controllers or strictly the joystick they have designed for the Commodore 64. Now it supports software updates via USB flash drive, so that's also really cool, and also probably leaves room for modifications later on down the line, which will probably also be unofficial. The best C64 retro games included, so here's the list of games. What's included in the box, so the C64 Mini, you get a joystick, an HDMI cable, a manual, a USB power lead. Packaging does not include an AC adapter, so my assumption is this is going to be powered via, for example, a micro USB plug-in, and that into like a wall adapter probably can run off the same power supply as a Raspberry Pi or even the USB slot in your computer. Those are my initial assumptions. I'm looking at the games here. I can see Pit Stop 2. I'll highlight it right there, and I'll go in the C section, and I can see California games as well. Now, I don't see that Mimi game that I was talking about earlier, which I'm not surprised about, but I do see California games and Pit Stop 2. As a retro gamer, so my overall thoughts on this right now, before this is even released, before I even know more details, this is pretty cool. Now, even if you're not a Commodore 64 fan, I still think this is very, very cool. And I'm saying this because it's really neat to see other companies coming out with NES Mini, SNES Mini style of consoles. So I'm really hoping that the retro themed mini console keeps up, brings retro gaming to the forefront, and continues the trend in its popularity. Now, do I think this is going to be as big of a seller as the NES Mini or SNES Mini? Heck no. I don't think this is going to be a very big seller, but I think it's going to sell. And I think it's going to sell to two kind of people. First and foremost, the collectors out there who like to collect things like this. And secondly, people who actually like gaming on the Commodore 64. For, I would say, the casual gamer out there, you could always just stick to emulation. You could always just take a look and see if you like a few Commodore 64 games, watch some YouTube videos of some gameplay, and go from there. Overall, though, this is really cool, and anything, in my opinion, that's bringing retro gaming to the forefront generally is worth a look. Now, in terms of quality for this, I honestly have no idea what to expect. I do know that the keyboard itself is non-functional. In terms of the controller, that might be a hit or miss. My memories of the Commodore 64 controller were not that great. Some people really liked it, and I was one of the ones who didn't really like it that much. It was reminded me of a little bit of an Atari controller, but just slightly worse. Now, many people might disagree with me with that, but you know what? That's a-okay. We're all entitled to our own opinions here. Now, if I go to the About page, they are saying they are releasing it with a suggested retail price of $69.99, so $70 for this, which puts it right in the similar ballpark as the SNES and NES Minis. It is fully licensed, and it's designed and developed by Retro Games Limited. And if you read a little bit about them here, it says made up of people with a combined games industry experience of over 100 years. Whenever something says combined games, like just a combined industry experience, I'm a little hesitant because you could have 100 people there with 1 year each. So 100 people with 1 year each could technically equal combined games industry of 100 years. So I'm always a little skeptical when it says that, but at the same time, that says they've successfully produced and released many games across many formats such as the C64, Spectrum, GBA, Wii, and more. Members of the team also successfully brought to market the C64 DTV Direct-to-TV C64 games console and Nintendo Wii C64 games, based in the UK but operating on a global basis. So that's not really telling me a whole lot, except they've got some experience. I'm really hoping that it's going to be very good when it comes out, or at least really cool. At the same time, it's kind of neat because this isn't a Kickstarter. This is an actual product being brought to market. So you don't really have to worry about a Kickstarter failing or an Indiegogo failing or anything like that. It's a legitimate mini console coming out. So I'm really looking forward to seeing more information in the coming months on this. And I'm really looking forward to seeing what they're going to bring out. That's all I've got for today. Let me know what you think about the C64 in the comments below. Hit that subscribe button. Thank you, everyone. Take care.